All right, good evening. Thank you for joining our virtual Sex Ed Sit-Out Town Hall. My name is David Walls, and I am Vice President of Texas Values, the largest statewide nonprofit dedicated to protecting faith, family, and freedom. Texas Values is proud to host tonight's event along with our Stand Up for Children ATX Coalition, as well as our coalition partners, Concerned Parents of Texas, CICI, and the U.S. Pastors Council. I'd also like to thank our friends here at Oak Meadow Baptist Church for allowing us to use their facilities this evening. And today was supposed to be Austin ISD Sex Ed Sit-Out Day, a day for parents to protest the school district's radical sex education curriculum by keeping their kids home from school. Well, if you hadn't heard, Austin ISD recently announced that they were canceling their sex education curriculum for this school year. And in light of the fact that all students are learning from home right now, we're excited to announce that we have 100% participation in our Sex Ed Sit-Out today. But in spite of this encouraging news, it's still important for us to educate and equip all Texans on the dangers of the radical sex education curriculum that's being promoted by pro-abortion and pro-LGBT groups, not just here in Austin, but all across the state. I want to encourage everyone to share this live stream right now. We'd love to get it as many viewers as we can this evening. And I also encourage folks to post their questions throughout our program tonight. And we're going to do our best to pick out some questions and try to have some time to address those later on in the program. I also want to remind folks that there's going to be a Spanish language version of this town hall that will be going live once we conclude the English version here this evening. I would now like to introduce Texas Values' policy advisor, Mary Elizabeth Castle. She's going to be our moderator for tonight's town hall. Mary Elizabeth?
Thank you, David. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our Sex Ed virtual town hall and also a 100% sit-out, as David said. Now, if you've been following Texas Values and the issues that we fight, you may know that over the past couple of years, we've been fighting the sex education program in Austin ISD. Now, this fight started even before I even started at Texas Values, but you may remember things really started to heat up when Austin ISD chose a curriculum from Planned Parenthood called Get Real. Now, the details of that curriculum were extreme, and you may remember some of the things that we posted on our website that they were teaching to kids as young as 3rd grade about gender identity and different activities to engage in at such a young age. Well, thanks to the passage of SB 22, that curriculum had to be kicked out, and Texas Values was there to testify to warn the school board that if they were to go on with this curriculum, it would violate the law that says that government entities cannot contract with abortion providers. So they decided not to go with Planned Parenthood Get Real. However, with that being out of the window, they chose a different curriculum with the same goals in mind to teach these ideas of gender identity, sexual orientation, and early activity among school-age kids. In this curriculum, they actually got from out of the country, from Alberta, Canada, from Alberta Health Services, which happens to be a foreign abortion provider. Now, with all of that said, with what they taught, we exposed everything in that curriculum, and we had over 100 parents come on October 28th to protest and testify against this curriculum, that this is something that they do not want for their children and is not good for their well-being. But the school board voted unanimously for this curriculum, and that's where we are today. While today was planned as a sit-out, we can now say that the curriculum will not be taught on today and was not taught today and will not be taught the rest of the school year. However, tonight we're wanting to warn you and teach you what is in this sex education curriculum that Austin ISD was planning to teach. And not only teach you about what's happening in Austin, but you know, what happens in Austin could happen in any city in Texas, and it can be spread anywhere. We'll also mention later on how this curriculum could be kind of a model of what is done statewide, because the State Board of Education will be voting on the health TEKS, which includes sex education, later this year. And we'll talk more about that. But tonight I'll we have some wonderful speakers, and I'll get into their introduction. First, we have Carol Ayala. She, on her own, started a group called Concerned Parents, and she has been rallying up parents for several years now, teaching them about these different sex education programs and what they mean for the well-being of children, and warning parents about what's actually in these sex education curriculums being shared across the state. Then we have Monica Cline. Monica Cline has a very inspiring and interesting story. She used to be a sex educator for Planned Parenthood, but she will tell you that this sex education curriculum that Planned Parenthood had is not good for children at all, and she will tell you how to recognize the different types of sex education programs and which ones are actually good for your children. Then we have Jennifer Kratky. She is a parent who became emboldened once she found out what was in the Austin ISD curriculum. She herself went over the 400+ pages of curriculum, and once she read the curriculum, she shared it with her friends, and she has a personal story to tell you about how dangerous this curriculum was going to be. And then last but not least, we have Pastor Hanoi Avila. He's a pastor in the greater Austin area, and he's been very passionate about getting churches involved, and he really wants to get the Christian community involved in fighting this type of curriculum. So welcome everybody, and we'll get started with our first speaker.
Hello, my name is Carol Ayala, and I serve as the Director of Concerned Parents of Texas and Coordinator of Stand Up for Children -ATX, or Defendiendo los Niños. Thank you so much for joining us. We are hosting this town hall meeting because there is an all-out war on the innocence of children in our Austin area and across Texas. We are a coalition of parents and concerned citizens who are standing up for the innocence of minor children to say no to the implementation of the radical sex ed and LGBT indoctrination in the Austin area across Texas in traditional public and public charter schools. This type of sex education normalizes diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and recruits kids to become LGBT and abortion activists. The goal? To shape our kids' minds in pursuit of a radical social agenda that stands in opposition to traditional moral values. In short, our kids are being indoctrinated. On October the 28th of last year, the Austin ISD Board of Trustees passed a curriculum, just as Mary Elizabeth was saying. And it was in opposition to many, many parents. And even after many, many months of people speaking up against it or asking for an opportunity to share with the school district as parents and community members, even trying to get on the Student Health Advisory Council, or SHAC, the Board of Trustees voted it through. What they actually voted was a hodgepodge of materials of curriculum. Some was staff created, some was from the Big Decisions curricula, and still other parts of it were from the Canadian abortion provider, Alberta Health Services. Well, it became, as more and more people began to become aware of this situation and they began to speak up, it became abundantly clear that we needed to join forces. It was then that Stand Up for Children, ATX, was born. Stand Up for Children and Defendiendo los Niños is a coalition of organizations, like I mentioned before, Concerned Parents of Texas, CC, or the Consejo de Iglesias Cristianas Independientes, a collaborative of independent Hispanic churches in the Austin area, Texas Values, and the U.S. Pastor Council. So how did this kind of sex ed get passed anyway? Well, you will see on this slide, by passing the National Sex Ed Standards as a district. Well, what are they? Well, basically, you'll see on this slide a lot of different pictures, but at the top, it says National Sexuality Education Standards. And you have about 3 major organizations named as Advocates for Youth, Answer Sex Ed, honestly, and SICUS, or the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. Well, what it boils down to is that these advocates, these abortion and LGBT advocates, got together and they decided to come up with some standards. And basically what it boils down to is that it's fine for teens to have sex as long as they learn some things and they feel ready to do it. And all three of these are aggressive. I want to mention that again. They are aggressive when it comes to promoting abortion and radical sexual rights for children and youth. And they're all intertwined with Planned Parenthood. So don't let the title, looking at the title, national, keep in mind that even though it is titled the National Sexuality Standards, it makes it sound like as if this organization was actually vetted or sanctioned by the US government, but actually it was just these organizations coming together to come up with standards that they would begin in kindergarten and go all the way through 12th grade, these LGBT and abortion advocacy groups. So all you have to look when you want to know what the standards are is to study in particular and research and look at their sex ed curricula, and you would see exactly what they intend to teach the children. And so Austin ISD knew that even with Planned Parenthood out of the picture, they still had to pick a curriculum that would be in keeping with their values. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Monica Cline, and I'm the founder of It Takes a Family. I educate and equip parents with the skills and knowledge necessary to have family trust and confidence. And my goal is to help parents reclaim parenthood so that you, the parent, are the leading voice in your child's life regarding sex, marriage, and relationships and identity. But that wasn't always my story. I'm also a former comprehensive sex educator of over 10 years, and I was trained by both the gay community and Planned Parenthood. In the next slide, you'll see a quote from Planned Parenthood. When they first brought me into their office on 6th Street to train me on how to reach out to school-age children with the message of comprehensive sex education, this is what they quoted to me. When you walk into a classroom of children, assume that they have done everything and anything when it comes to sex, and if they haven't, they will. So they believe that it's the role of the comprehensive sex educator to then expose children to all forms of sex, all bodily fluids, the use of condoms, getting tested and treated, because they know that it's just a matter of when they will get an STD. And they do all of this in the next slide by breaking down our children's natural inhibitions and normalizing school-age sex. Now, even though they believe that children are sexually active and have sexual desires at a very young age, they're also acknowledging that our children have natural inhibitions. And so they do exercises to ensure that they can begin to get children comfortable with talking about sexually explicit topics. And this is just one example on this collage of words, is basically exposing them to all of these things, even if they don't already know about it. Next slide. The next thing that they do is normalize sexually transmitted infections. So you see here that there's actually a company that sells the STD Deluxe stuffed STD animals. They basically, one of the exercises is to toss those STD animals to you and say, oh, look, you caught herpes. And you also see a picture of a peer educator who is a minor. He is a peer sex educator, and he's basically saying that he really wants people to understand that sexually transmitted infections are normal and to be expected. So this is a really dangerous message, because now we're basically saying, or comprehensive sex educators are basically saying, that disease is normal and that we should just get comfortable with it. Next slide. Comprehensive sex education teaches that teen sex is the expectation and that everyone is doing it. But the truth is that since 1998, the CDC has seen a significant drop in teen sexual initiation. So it's not true that they're all doing it. 52% of the boys report never had a sexual contact, and 60% of girls report never having any sexual contact. The next slide, please. Contraceptives make everything safe, make sex safe. And so the goal of comprehensive sex education is to then increase the use of contraception, whether it's condoms or birth control pills or other hormonal contraceptives. But according to Guttmacher, which is actually a research arm of Planned Parenthood, even they admit that over 50% of the women who have had an abortion report that they were using some form of birth control when they became pregnant. So obviously it's not working. The most used method among teens is the condom. 97% of teen females reported that condom is the primary contraceptive method that they use. But yet the CDC is still reporting that youth ages 15 to 24 contract about 10 million new STDs each year. So teenagers ages 15 to 24 only make up 27% of the sexually active population, but yet they represent over 50% of the new STIs each year. Contraceptives do not make sex safe. Next slide, please. Comprehensive sex education also wants to encourage children to question their sexual orientation and even their gender. And they want the children to become activists for the LGBTQ community. You will see that in the Austin ISD curriculum. Here's the truth, though. We can teach our youth to be kind and respectful of each other and our differences without indoctrination. Also, in 2011, the CDC reported that LGBTQ youth are at greater risk of dating violence, forced sex, drug use, less likely to use condoms, have more sexual partners, and initiate sex at a younger age. They're at greater risk. So LGBT youth should also be protected and not sexualized through comprehensive sex education. Next slide, please. In this diagram, you see that teens actually report that they feel pressured to have sex after coming out of a comprehensive sex education course. They actually feel that these courses, which also show them condom demonstrations, make them feel pressured and also make them feel as though sex is expected of them. They also feel that this form of education pressures them more than even their peers. Next slide, please. But I want to tell you what the youth say. So here are some quotes from youth from the Austin area. There was a day when I was still a comprehensive sex educator when Planned Parenthood asked me to go to East Austin to an alternative school to teach comprehensive sex education to 13-year-old boys and girls. I just started the comprehensive sex education like I normally do. I had a whiteboard behind me and I wrote down anal sex, vaginal sex, and oral sex. And on the other side of the board, I wrote down blood, semen, and vaginal secretions, and I started the discussion. A 13-year-old girl raised up her hand and asked me a question, and I'll clean up her language for you just a bit. And she wasn't being disrespectful, she was just honest. And she asked me, ma'am, when I give boys oral sex, I gag. Can you teach me how to do it better? I'm sure you're shocked by that statement and that question, and so was I. So I restated her question to her, just to clarify. And I said, okay, so when you're involved in this activity, you gag and you don't like it. She said, that's right, I don't like it, but you could teach me how to do it better. And I said, well, have you ever considered just not doing the sexual activity that you don't like? At that moment, all the children looked at me as though I had said something that was really foreign to them. And I took that opportunity and I pointed to the board behind me and I said, guys, do you realize that you don't have to have oral sex, vaginal sex, or oral sex, or anal sex? And if you don't, then you don't have to ever come in contact with anyone's bodily fluids and you don't have to worry about disease or pregnancy. The same little girl raised her hand and she said, ma'am, no one's ever told us that. Next thing I know, these kids started talking about abstinence. I didn't really even use the word abstinence, but they started coming up with ideas on ways that they could hang out with each other without touching one another. They talked about playing basketball or watching movies in the community center. And as they continued to have this discussion, a different little girl came up to me and was very sad, and she said, I can't do what they're talking about because I'm already sexually active and now it's expected of me. Isn't that right? And I said, no, it's not right. You can choose to not have sex, and no one has the right to tell you that you have to do it. And if you can choose to abstain from sex until you get married if you want to. For the first time, that little girl in that classroom smiled brightly, ran back to her friends, and started continuing the discussion about abstinence. And those are just two of the quotes that you see on the slide. But when I started realizing, and that was one of the many stories of teenagers that I had experiences with, realizing that they did not want to be sexually active, but yet they felt that they were expected to have sex, I decided to quit. And I wanted to create resources for parents, which is why I created It Takes a Family, and you can find that at ittakesafamily.org. And I asked my son, I said, I want to create resources for parents. What do you think kids want to hear? And he said, Mom, please do not create a curriculum or videos that we're forced to watch. I said, well, what do kids want? And here's his quote. He said, kids want to know what you expect from us. We want to know your heart for us. I had very clear and honest conversations with my son, and I always went at his pace, never giving him more than he needed for his age or his own boundaries that he set. Next slide. But I also want to emphasize that the people of Texas have spoken, and that feedback you can read in the Texas Education Code 28.004. And as you can see from this slide, I've highlighted the word abstinence because that is the standard for Texas. Human sexuality education is also not mandatory in the state of Texas, and it's not required for graduation. But if a school were to choose to have sex education, according to the Families of Texas, we are to have curriculum that speaks about abstinence and is medically accurate.
Thank you, Monica. Am I on? Hi, I'm Jennifer Kratky. I'm a mom of 2 students in Austin ISD. So I can kind of give the parental perspective. You know, Carol and Monica have been involved in this topic for many years. And, you know, just 1 year ago, I didn't know anything about this topic. My oldest was in 4th grade and starting to get to that age where, you know, questions were coming up naturally, like you said, in the home, and starting to think about, you know, how I was going to address these topics in the home. And so when I noticed an email from Austin ISD that the human sexuality curriculum was going to be revamped, it caught my interest. I saw there was a town hall hosted by Austin ISD, and I decided to go. I thought, wow, a lot of parents are going to be here. It's going to be a really exciting and interesting topic. And to be honest, there weren't that many parents there. We know that Austin ISD does not make it easy for parents to give feedback. There were only 2 town halls in all of Austin, and it's really hard to get across Austin during evening rush hour, right? So I think that's probably more why. And they don't also give you a lot of notice on those events sometimes either. But anyway, I went to the event, and Carol was outside of the event passing out her pamphlets. And to be honest, at the time, I kind of thought she was crazy, right? Because my daughter had been in Austin ISD for 5 years, never had a problem. You know, I trusted the school district, right? Growing up in Texas, conservative values, you kind of trust that the school district will do right by your kids, right? And but then when it came to the point a few months later where Austin ISD actually rolled out the proposed curriculum for parents to review, and I really dug into the material, I realized that lady wasn't so crazy. This material is really bad. It's not right for our children. It's too explicit for these young ages, and there's definitely an agenda here. So I started texting and emailing and calling all my friends and acquaintances with kids in Austin ISD, and I said, hey, have you looked at this curriculum? And they said, no, why? Is there something to be concerned about? You know, parents are really busy. So I sent a screenshot of, I remember it was the 6th grade role plays, and everyone was shocked. They couldn't believe that this material would be taught at this young of age. So that's the point when I said, you know what, I need to do something. I need to make parents aware of what's going on, because if parents knew, then they would stand up against this. So that's what I want to do tonight, is I want to kind of hit a few highlights of what's in the curriculum so that parents will understand truly why this is not good for our kids. So we'll start with starting in 3rd grade. That's the curriculum that was revamped for Austin. Starting in 3rd grade, you'll see this slide of this cute little boy. It's teaching about the reproductive system. It's going to teach that the male body has a penis, scrotum, testes, and sperm. The female body has a vagina, uterus, ovaries, and eggs, and that for a baby to be created, an egg and a sperm must come together. Now, that is true, and some parents are going to be fine with that, but I know a lot of parents are going to think that 3rd grade is probably too early to teach that concept. And the bigger issue is that parents may, even if they think that 3rd grade is an appropriate age, then they may want to, it's a really sensitive conversation that they may want to have in the home. And so my main message is just for parents to be aware of what's in the curriculum, because also Austin ISD is encouraging kids to be mixed gender for these lessons, girls and boys together, and so some parents are not going to like that. So that's the questions you need to be asking. Is this going to be taught with boys and girls together? Is a male teacher going to be teaching this to my 9-year-old daughter, or vice versa? So these are the questions that you need to be asking and be aware of what's in the curriculum. On to 4th grade, then we add in the more explicit images. You'll see here of the male reproductive anatomy. First of all, that looks more like an adult anatomy to me. I don't know about you, but I think it's going to not really resonate with 10-year-olds. But it's normalizing the anus as part of the male reproductive anatomy, which we know is not biologically correct. They're also adding in the vocabulary of ejaculation for males and the clitoris for females. Again, these are 10-year-olds. And going on to 5th grade, this is kind of more of the universally not supported material. I mean, Stand Up for Children is a diverse organization. You know, we have Democrats, Republicans, independents, but this is one thing that really a lot of people have a problem with. This is a shape of a cookie, a gingerbread cookie, but it's called the Genderbread Person, that's going to teach our 10 and 11-year-olds that they can decide in their brain what their gender is, and that their genitalia determines their sex. And it's also bringing in gender expression and sexual attraction. It also says at the bottom there that sex is assigned at birth. Okay, so this is a big problem because most of us believe that sex is determined at conception and that babies in the womb have value, and that is a valuable person with a gender already in the womb. That's why we have gender reveal parties, right? So you'll have to understand that this curriculum is continually saying that sex is assigned at birth and that gender identity is separate and can be decided by the child. On to more gender topics. In 7th grade, we have this video called Expressing Myself My Way. This is a cute little penguin boy named Charles who is quite unhappy because he was, again, labeled as a boy when he was born. And he goes into a dressing room, next slide, and comes out in girl clothes, changes his name to Charlotte, and now everything is okay, and he's happy now. It says your gender identity is about how you feel on the inside, like a boy, girl, both, or neither. This is just really upsetting to me because this is telling 11 and 12-year-old children who have, I mean, all kids have a hard time in middle school, right? It's such a hard time in life. And I hate that they're being presented this option of changing their gender that's going to make everything okay. It's not truth. And also notice that the parents are kind of looking like maybe they don't approve of it. And it says on the text that the parents need to come around. Okay, so it's creating division between parents and children. Next slide, it's also 6th grade. 6th graders are going to be told what are small ways that you can challenge homophobia in your everyday life. Again, more division. This is where parents like me, who even though we can legally opt out of these lessons, I have a real fear that my child is going to be ostracized and perhaps even bullied because they might be labeled as homophobic just because they don't agree with everything being presented here. And it could be causing division between parents and children, other family members and children. You know, again, 11 and 12-year-olds taught to challenge the values of the traditional values of their family. And then on to just the sexually explicit nature of the material. In the next slide, you'll see these are transmission card sort about STDs. And again, this is 6th grade. They're bringing in the topic of mouth to genital contact and genital to anal contact. So many people are just going to think that 6th grade is not appropriate to be discussing these topics in school. And the next slide is, again, 6th grade, telling 6th graders to be a health services detective. This worksheet comes straight from Alberta Health Services and is encouraging 6th graders to know where they can go for birth control and STD testing, and it's asking them to know if confidentiality is provided at this. So you know what this is leading towards. This is probably going to lead towards kids writing Planned Parenthood on there. The next slide, I hope you don't have any kids in the room because this one's pretty explicit, but this is shown in 7th grade, and most of us would agree this is actually pornographic. This was actually one of the most shocking things that is in the curriculum for 7th graders. You can see the image of the erect penis and even pulling out with a female's legs in the air. This is just not appropriate, most people are going to say, for 7th grade. Another thing that in the pregnancy prevention lesson, again, abstinence is the Texas Education Code, right? That's supposed to be the focus of middle school sex education, but the 7th grade lessons will teach about pulling out. As you see in this image, it will teach about the pill, the patch, the ring, sponges, Depo-Provera shots, arm implants, IUDs, and condoms. Do you think that's abstinence focused? They're spending a lot more time on these other pregnancy prevention methods other than abstinence. So that's why we say that this breaks TEA code, because it's focusing more on that. One more thing on the curriculum is in 8th grade. This is straight from a slide straight from the 8th grade curriculum. This is from the World Health Organization, who we are all just really big fans of these days, right? We just really trust the WHO right now. But they're using the WHO definitions for sexuality and sexual health. And they're defining sexual health as having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences. And for sexual health to be attained, the sexual rights of all persons must be respected, protected, and fulfilled. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Telling 8th graders that they have sexual rights that must be fulfilled. And it also uses, in that context, you'll see the words eroticism, pleasure, fantasies, and desires. So a lot of people are just going to think that the way that this is being presented is not age appropriate for 8th graders. And so, yes, I'm a part of Stand Up for Children ATX, which is the shirt that I'm wearing. And we have a Facebook page, and we seek to gather parents under our umbrella that will speak out. I wanted to give just a couple of examples of why that's important for parents to be engaged with one another and to speak out to their school district, their board members, their principals, because things like this start to happen. The next slide is a picture of someone named Miss Kitty Litter, who was invited to an elementary school to read a book to children. This was Drag Queen Story Hour in a public school, elementary school in Austin. And these are the kind of things that we need to make each other aware of, so that when I hear that this is going on at Blackshear Elementary, I can talk to my principal and say, hey, I heard this happen in another school. I really do not want to see this happening at my school. The other side is really loud. We need to be loud too. And the next slide is actually I don't know if you can read this very well, but this was a student climate survey that was given to 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that says, this February, that says sex is what a person is born, gender is how a person feels. Please select the response that best describes you. And so a lot of children came away from this survey being confused. You know, why is the word sex being put on a survey for me as a 3rd grader? why do third graders not know if they're a boy or a girl? I mean, it was a very, as soon as a few parents that were engaged with us at Stand Up for Children heard this happening at their school, the rest of us started complaining, filing grievances, speaking out, and this survey was pulled very quickly. So that is a reason that we all need to be aware of what's going on in each other's campuses, and so we can advocate for what's best for our kids. And so I want to invite anyone to follow Stand Up for Children ATX Facebook page and just get engaged with us. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm a father of a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I would not like my child. It would break my heart if my child would have to see this images and graphics, and the verbiage used here is pretty crazy. Anyhow, I would like to present myself a little bit to kind of bring some context here. My name is Hanoi Avila. I'm a pastor in Leander. I pastor a Latino church, first-generation Latino church. I also founded an organization called Consejo de Iglesias Cristianas Independientes, which you just mentioned, which is a collective of Latino churches, independent churches in the city of Austin. So that collective is composed of about 30 churches. They're all Latino, Spanish-speaking, and we minister to the Latino community in Austin. And it's interesting that 55% of the student body of this institution is Latino. And so that was very shocking to me. And the question is, if the church is not responding citywide on issues like this, how is the church, Latino immigrant church, going to cope with this reality, right? And so that was shocking to me, and that's how I became part of the coalition. My interest of representing those kids that are underrepresented in our district, and I believe that this decision was passed without surveying the parents or communicating the parents. I believe up till today we don't have any of that material translated in Spanish, and so it's very concerning. But anyhow, that's not the primary reason I'm here. I am here because I'm concerned about the body of Christ, the church. I'm a minister of the gospel, and I am concerned both for the Hispanic church, the Anglo church, the African American church. I'm concerned for the entire church of Austin. And it's interesting because if you pull the doctrine from each of our churches, primarily talking about evangelical, broader evangelical church, even including Catholics, you will find verbiage such as this one, and this is our position on human sexuality. And it's written there. It's part of our bylaws, part of our faith articles, something that we observe in our churches. So I'm going to read the one that we have adopted as CC, and it's very clear, very straightforward, and to me, it's very counter to what's taking place. And so when I see the reality of doctrine and the embodiment that is taking in our society, it's really concerning. So this is what we have. We believe that God has established marriage as a lifelong, exclusive relationship between one man and one woman. And that all intimate sexual activity outside the marriage relationship, whether heterosexual, homosexual, or otherwise, is immoral and therefore sinful. And we cite scripture, all across scripture. We can't deny that from Genesis to Revelation, we have been left with the text that gives us clear identity, and that means male and female. And so when I'm seeing the material here that the city has adopted, or the city of Austin has adopted, and I compare that with scripture, and I compare that with our local doctrines, there's definitely an issue here. And so I'm encouraging our church, our Latino church, to really stand up and dive into this, because this is going to impact our generation. This is going to impact our youth. This is going to impact our city. And so, again, the call to the church and the call to CC, which is the organization that I lead, is, okay, if we have a text and if we have doctrines that are calling us to do something about this, why aren't we present? Why aren't we getting familiar with what's taking place in our city with our children? So we believe that God created human race, male and female. And so it is our belief that God created sexual identity. It's not up to you or me or some curriculum to tell me that sexual identity, it's just something abstract or something that I just decide, right? And so we hold truth to Scripture. And so that all conduct with the intent to adopt a gender other than one at birth, it's immoral and therefore sin. And again, and this is written and on the majority of broader evangelical churches in Austin have this doctrine very similar to it. But the question is, what are we doing as a church? Now, I know and I also understand that as an adult, you should, and again, I repeat, as an adult, not as a child, you should have the right to choose your relationship, whether it is heterosexual, homosexual, or otherwise, as long as you do not infringe on others' rights to life and pursuit of happiness. I also believe that the sexual identity is a choice. You have the right to decide your sexual identity within the confines of natural law, which we believe it's very clear and straightforward in Scripture, or the unnatural law for yourself. So what I think is wrong is that the public institutions such as AISD, with taxpayer money, with our money, would be willing to teach such an obscene sexual curriculum with the intent to indoctrinate, because to me, this is indoctrination. Our future generation, without taking into consideration the diverse views that are in this institution. We have Catholics, we have Mormons, we have evangelicals, that if we were to have a conversation about the content of this curriculum with their parent, I would tell you, they would say no. Absolutely not. My concern is we as pastors are not leading effectively our ministries and our congregants on how to go about this. So I believe that the teaching of sexuality should be left up to the parent, not the school district. Leave it out. I think it's a very fine line. And so, as a pastor, and speaking in representation of our collective of 30 churches in this city, Hispanic churches, we just don't agree with it. And we're going to take action. We believe that the church should take action. I'm also a member of the U.S. Pastor Council, currently the interim chair for this organization, and we are talking about this same issue here. And so there's hope. I think the church is starting to get informed and more informed, but I believe we gotta reach out more and more with more information like this. So I have two things that I want to say to the church tonight. But before I do that, as a pastor and as a father, I am deeply concerned with the long-term impact that this curriculum will have in the fabric of our society, especially in the core of our foundation as human, which is family. And I'm not going to get scientific. There's no time here to do that. But let me tell you, it will have some major impact. Science is clear, but overall, the Bible is noticeably clear of the consequence and the impact that this curriculum, once is embodied by the teachers that are not trained and equipped to do that, it's going to be dangerous. And so, as a pastor, I call upon the Church of Austin and the Christian community to act immediately. Parents, I just encourage you to opt out from this curriculum. This is not good for your children. And let me tell you, there's a lot of hidden agenda in this sex ed, which is very shocking. It's not about education. What I have assessed personally is about power, my way, and what I want to do with culture. And the sad part about it is the church is silent. Right? And then the last call is pastors and Christian leaders in the church in Austin. I believe it is time to stand and say no and to begin to sound the trumpet. What do I mean by this? I want to close with scripture. Ezekiel 33:6 clearly states it. And this is primarily for my pastors and colleagues in the city. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet to warn the people, and the sword comes to take someone's life, the people's life will be taken because of their sin. But I will hold the watchmen accountable for their blood. We have a responsibility to lead the church. We have a responsibility to lead the youth in our ministry. And so that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Pastor Avila. And so we just wanted to end with a few call to action steps. First of all, we hope that with the information that you learned tonight, that you will opt your children out of comprehensive sex education. And you learn now what that actually means. You know, if you were saying comprehensive calculus, you might think that's a really good course because of the term comprehensive. But now that you actually know what that means, you'll now know that you need to opt your children out of the sex education. Now, if you're not in Austin, it may be different for your school district, but either go to the school district office yourself as a parent. Always go to the school district website and look for those forms to make sure that you can opt your child out of that program. Secondly, educate yourself and meet with your SHAC and school board. Now, a lot of people don't know there's a semi-secret organization called the School Health Advisory Council. Some people know what it is and some people don't pay attention to it, but this School Health Advisory Council is a group of people that's supposed to be made of parents, community leaders, even pastors, and they help choose different things in health curriculum like healthy eating, but mostly sex education. And now as a parent, you have a right to actually be on the SHAC, and you should try to apply to be on there because they take the fact that community leaders can be on this a little too seriously. And so you'll have SHACs where the majority of the members are from Planned Parenthood, or the majority of the members are from, places like Alberta Health. Well, they're not from Canada, but they're from certain type of health services. And you have very few parents on these actual SHACs. So please, meet with them, go to the meetings, but if you can, I would say you should actually try to be on one. And always go to the school board meetings. A lot is discussed in these meetings. That's where they voted for the curriculum, and that's where they talked about the curriculum for several months. Also, attend the State Board of Education meeting at the end of June to influence the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. As I mentioned earlier, they are in the process at the state level of revising the Health Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills for all public education students in the state of Texas. And so with that comes sex education. And there's a really large campaign out there to radically transform what has been taught for about the last 15 years to make it include comprehensive sex education, gender identity, and even beyond what you saw here tonight. So be sure to pay attention to that. If you're in the Austin area, please come to that meeting at the end of June to testify. They want to hear from people. They want to hear from parents about what their children should learn. Also, advocate for sex education or sexual risk avoidance. And go to It Takes a Family webinar on sex education options. Definitely educate yourself on the subject. Go to Monica's website, ittakesafamily.org. Carol's organization, Concerned Parents, has a lot of resources. We at Texas Values have a lot of resources, and really get familiar with the terminology, because it can be very tricky onto what they're teaching, if you don't actually take the time to look at it, as Jennifer was saying. And also have conversations with your children about relationship, sex, and your expectations for their best health. A lot of what is happening in this education, like Jennifer said, is creating a division between children and parents. And when that happens, it's very easy for them to seek out this type of education and kind of seek out things that, that they haven't been raised to believe, and it's very easy for them to be vulnerable to different things that are out there. So it's very important that you create that relationship with your child so you can teach them about these subjects. Now, I think we either have questions or planted questions. So, David?
Yes, we've been following the Facebook comments and appreciate everyone that's been commenting and sharing, and encourage folks to continue to do that. We'll get into a couple questions. First off, some encouragement. Our president of our organization, Jonathan Sines, has been watching the live stream, and he wanted to just say thank you and a great job to the Texas Values team and our coalition partners. And he wanted to specifically thank elected officials like Senator Donna Campbell, who was the author of SB 22 that we talked about. And so just wanted to give some encouragement. We've had a lot of encouragement in the comments. A lot of question and discussion about parental involvement. And so I'm just going to ask the question, kind of take a couple of comments and put into a question. How can parents get started to get engaged in their local community?
Well, I'd have to say they could go to our website at concernedparentsoftexas.com or Stand Up for Children and get a hold of us. We have lots of materials to share with you. I know you have a lot of questions about your own school districts. We can help you navigate getting started exactly on that issue with your school district.
It just takes a few people to start. Is that better? I would say it just takes a few people to start because Carol was out there and vocal. When I became aware of what was going on, I was able to join her, right? And our movement grew. So it just takes a few to start and be bold and to speak at school board meetings and to start a Facebook page, start a website, start talking to your friends and say, spread the word, spread the word. And that way, by the time that came to the school board meeting, we had 100 parents. They were ready to testify. But it just takes one to be bold and to start.
I think the other thing that parents need to do is learn about these topics yourself. Many times parents think that they think it's too graphic or it's too awkward to talk to their children about this, or that the children don't want to talk to them about it. And none of that is true. The truth is that we are the sole authority over our children, and it is our responsibility to teach our children about their bodies, about puberty, what they're feeling. All of these things are perfectly normal to feel, and if they're going through puberty, then their body is changing just as it's meant to. And they really need to hear this from their parents, not a stranger in the school. So it's really important that you start to learn that. And as well as getting these resources from Carol, I really encourage you to watch my webinar to learn the difference between comprehensive sex education and sexual risk avoidance. Because you could go to the school and look at a curriculum and you may not be able to discern whether it's a good one or one that could harm your children. So there are plenty of resources. Come to ittakesafamily.org. I'd be happy to share that webinar with you, or email me as well.
All right, another question that we just got that I think is pretty straightforward, but a question was asked, does every school district in Texas have a shack, or is that something that's just in Austin?
Yes, so every school district does have a shack. It's actually written in the Texas Education Code, which you heard referenced tonight. So in order to have a sex education program, they actually recommend, and it's codified in law, that you have a shack or school health advisory council.
And you can get on.
They're supposed to. They're supposed to by law, but we have gotten word from districts that don't. But they are supposed to. So you could be the first one to make it happen and follow the law.
And many times schools may have a shack, but they're not announcing it on their website. So it's really important that if you do not find shack information on your district's website, then you need to contact your principal, and you need to find out when those meetings are happening, who is the coordinator, and get involved.
We had some comments related to the religious freedom implications, and so concern, or could you address the concern that the religious freedom of parents might be trampled with curriculums like this in public schools?
Well, I think the pastor did that very eloquently, just because, you know, this is a teaching. This is an indoctrination. And people, you know, have at times told me, well, you're trying to indoctrinate them on Christianity or something. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's why this is a parent's job, because this oversteps the bounds of family and authority.
I think a lot of us view this curriculum as almost a religion itself, because
Yes.
it is a set of values, okay?
Yes.
Transgenderism is a set of values that some people subscribe to and some of us don't. And so we feel like it's actually pushing a certain set of values that tramples on, like you said, the rights of not just Christians, but Muslims, Jewish. All the Abrahamic faiths are being pushed to the side and actually discriminated against in this curriculum. And I actually have spoken to someone in Austin ISD administration. I won't name names for their own privacy, but they are saying that Christians are more discriminated against in Austin ISD than the LGBT community currently. So that is a real concern. And I wanted to add too that I know a lot of our commenters, we get this all the time. Well, why don't you just put your kids in private school or homeschool or charter school? That's wonderful for a lot of families. That's actually not really helpful for our organization, because the reality is that 95% of children in Texas are in public school, and we want to come alongside and help all children, right?
Plus, you're taxpayers. Why should you?
Yes.
You are already paying for school
This is the future.
with your tax dollars.
These children that are being taught this are the future of Texas. These are the future voters of Texas, the future leaders, the ones that your son and daughters might be marrying. So we need to care about all children, and that includes those in public school.
Also, the curriculum is not medically accurate. So someone may be experiencing gender dysphoria, and there is help for that. But this is not what this curriculum is talking about. And even if it were, it's not an appropriate topic for learning about your body and just basic anatomy or biology. And so that is one of the big problems here, is that this curriculum is not evidence-based, it is not medically accurate, it's actually dangerous. It's setting up the expectation that having sex outside of marriage is normal and healthy and safe, and it is not, given the statistics on the STIs. And so basically, and you know, something that Jennifer mentioned earlier about privacy and confidentiality, that is a very touchy subject for me, because when it comes to parents and children, no, parents are the authority and the stewards over their children. But the CDC uses a word, privacy and confidentiality of your children, to ensure that there's a wedge between the parent and the child. And it allows the school, or it allows comprehensive sex educators, it allows family planning clinics like Planned Parenthood to then wedge themselves between parents and their children and basically guide children towards sexual activity, getting exposed to disease, having unplanned pregnancies, and then they just guide them to abortion, and that cycle continues to revolve, all the while keeping secrets from the parents, keeping parents out of it, and they call it privacy and confidentiality. That is not privacy and confidentiality, that is usurping parental rights.
Absolutely. And if you have any more questions, please comment on the Facebook page, but also submit any questions to info@txvalues.org. We just thank you for tuning in to this virtual town hall event. We don't have an audience. We're practicing social distance as best we can. People's hands were clean when they passed the mic. So we just wanted to make that clear. But we thank you for tuning in to this event, and we hope that it was very helpful and educational. And each of these people, with the exception of the parent, but have a website where you can go learn more about the curriculum that is not only in Austin, but in other parts of Texas. And thank you so much. Texas Values is a 501c3 organization. As always, if you can support us, we understand these challenging times, but if you can support us, please do, and we always appreciate your support. And thank you, and have a good night.
Y esperan por la presentación en español.